One world currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole here on the Orion Talk Radio Network, oriontalkradio.com. I want to thank you all for tuning in again this evening. It is Friday, July 27th, 2012. It is the opening day of the Olympic Illuminati ceremonies over there in London, and I didn't get a chance to really see any of the opening ceremonies, but from a couple still shots that I have seen that people have sent me, there was apparently a mock child sacrifice. And I saw a bunch of pyramids along with the all-seeing eye, you know, the pyramid or the triangle with the eye in the center, clearly made out whether it was in fireworks or lights. I really couldn't tell because I looked at it really quick. This was only a few minutes ago, actually, before I came on air. But from what I could tell, there was a lot of Illuminati symbolism in there and in-your-face stuff, which that doesn't surprise anybody that knows about the Olympics, because the Olympics are actually in the, you know, the idea of this one world government. They use the Olympics as a vehicle to push it. You know, Adolf Hitler actually designed the Olympic ring logo that we know today. So, and he used to talk of a new world order. But, you know, again, none of this is connected, ladies and gentlemen. Just go back to sleep. Anyway, I didn't really get a chance to look at it too much. So I will, and, you know, within the next week, I'll have either I'll do one myself or I'll get someone to come on with me and we'll just tear it apart and go over it and talk about anything that's gone on. But I'd rather wait until we get into the Olympics a little more to see what other kind of ceremonial things they do and throw in our faces and see if they try to even pull anything off, or if, like, I think this has all been done just to amp fear, because that really is how they control everybody, and they do feed off of it. So they need that fear. And in this day and age, in order to get people scared of certain things, it's not like they can 20 or 30 years ago. You know, people don't look at cell phones like they're magic. So they look at it like a gadget. So it's much harder with a more tech-savvy public to fool them. So you have to keep them on edge, and sometimes you have to do theatrics, like putting missiles on roofs and getting even putting disinfo out there into the alternative media community about you know, false flag events and everything. I'm not saying something couldn't happen, but I mean the idea that they could put out that information just so everybody would freak out and be running around going, "Oh my God, false flag! Oh my God, false flag!" I mean, that in itself does put out a certain amount of negativity and fear, whether we like it or not. And these people are masters of manipulation, so we should not allow ourselves to be manipulated emotionally. And in that vein, tonight I have back on the show somebody that will help you keep yourself from being manipulated in many different ways, especially in the courtroom. Now, you all know him. He's been on my show once before, and he is one of our top hosts here on the network. It's Nathan Fraser, formerly known as Paranoid. And the last time you were on, we got deep into the admiralty law, deep into the court system, as much as we could in a 2-hour show. And afterwards, you and I had this pretty long conversation off air, and you got into a little bit more detail about some of the stuff you've seen and witnessed in the courtroom itself. And I had to get you back on, man, because you just I can't, when I think of like how to deal with the police or how to deal with the court system, I can't think of anybody better that I could bring on to explain it to people, because the last time, not only were you able to lay it out in a nice, clean format, but you were able to make even the layperson understand it. You know what I mean? So I want to get into the court. I want to get into protecting yourself and stuff. But before we get into that, I just want your quick take on this stuff, since the last time you were on, this mass shooting in Colorado happened. So I wanted to get your take on what happened there really quick. And we don't have to go off too much on a tangent, but I know that you know about MK Ultra and mind control and Manchurian candidates and things like that. So from your standpoint, especially now that we've had some time to see how the police department's been handling things, and again, the court system, they've covered up the videos and stuff. How exactly, or what exactly, I should say, is your take on the whole thing? Besides that, I'm sure you probably think it's a false flag event. Do you think the court thing in itself, what the judge is doing with, sealing all the evidence, is very telling? I do. To me, it's a red flag. But what's your take, Nathan?
Yeah, I'm going to say that it's going to be impossible for this guy to get a fair trial. I'm not really weighing in either way whether he was actually the person that did this atrocity in Aurora, which is only about 50 miles away from where I live at. I speculate that there's a lot more to the story than what we're being told. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't add up. Even the arresting officers are questioning things. So I obviously am questioning things as well, especially being a quote-unquote conspiracy theorist. But as far as the legal aspect goes, as far as his court situation goes, anybody that watched his initial little hearing that he had earlier this week, where he just looked completely drugged out of his mind. I don't know what they had him on, but he was very non-responsive. He almost seemed like he didn't even realize where he was at. One of the very first rules and one of the fundamental rules of court is that they're not allowed to proceed in any way whatsoever if you're under the influence of any kind of mind-altering substances. Anything that goes on in a courtroom is supposed to be 100% knowing and voluntary, which it never really is, but they're supposed to at least put up the facade like it is. And that's one of the things that they'll always ask you when you go into court is, first of all, they'll ask you if you've been coerced in any way, and then they'll ask you, are you under the influence of any drugs or alcohol? And that includes prescription drugs. And the reason they ask that is because if you're not of your right, sound mind, you're not in a position to where you're supposed to be able to go through that type of trial. And from the video that was released and recorded live and the pictures that were released, it's quite apparent that this guy is not in his right mind. He's definitely under the influence of some sort of psychiatric or psychotropic drugs. And to be proceeding against him under that condition right there shows that this entire court proceeding has no pretense of giving this guy a fair trial. I think they're just going to railroad him. They're going to give the people, the emotional people of Colorado and of the United States in general, they're going to give these people the lynching that they want, and this guy is not going to get a fair trial whatsoever.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, it's been, there isn't I don't think there's a spot in the country that this hasn't been beamed to via CNN, MSNBC, Fox, or whoever, covering it. But I also think that it's very telling, and I'm glad you pointed this out, because this made me think while you just pointed this out that, if he's drugged out of his mind, right? What better way to hide it than to have the judge not allow anybody to see what's going on? Because then the only people that know what's going on are the people in the courtroom, and if the courtroom is controlled, because technically it's the judge's courtroom, then he's got everything controlled. He's got 2 gag orders now, where first it was nobody could release any information or talk about it, and then now the press, the cameras can't even be in there. And I think that second one was in a response to how drugged out this guy looked, because that immediately brought up, people saying, was he drugged up, blah, 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 and the sheriff's department wouldn't answer anything. And then the media kept trying to push that, he's doing that to act like, he's inept. He's doing this to act, like he's out of his mind, but he's just play acting. And I don't think he's play acting. I mean, he looked to me like he was on some sort of serious drug, and I don't think it was just one. It was probably a cocktail of things, and he looked like he was out of it. So, that's a really good point. You made me think of that. What better of a way to be able to take advantage of this guy and not give him a fair trial, like you said, by not having the cameras in there? Because then there's no, you know what I mean? There's no, who knows? They can say anything that happened, and whatever they say happened, because there's a gag order on everything, so nobody can come out in the media and go against it, because if they do, they'll go to jail. So, I mean, that's smart. I mean, I'm not saying I agree with it, but from their site, from their view on things, it's a smart way to attack things. So that's and again, that's why I wanted to bring you on, Nathan, because I wanted your opinion on this, because to me, I didn't even, I figured they were hiding something, but I didn't even think of it in that aspect until you said that. And then I was like, oh my God, it's like they're hiding right in plain sight, right?
Yeah, and the sad thing is most of the people in America have already been convinced that this guy's guilty, and they're not asking themselves the questions that really should be asked. And this guy's going to go through court, and he's probably going to be in this condition the whole way through. And it's so hard to speculate on what the backdoor deals are. I mean, I oftentimes think that when people take the heat, like patsies take the heat for this type of thing, I sometimes think that they fake the death sentences and send them off to some, Peruvian island with a big bank account. There's no way to tell. There's obviously something that makes the people cooperate. Maybe their family members are threatened. Maybe all different types of things that are possibilities. But definitely from what's been visible so far, I would say it's going to be impossible for this man to get a fair trial. The fact that nobody saw his face when the shooting was actually happening, it was somebody in a gas mask. The fact that I mean, in 90 seconds, this guy was able to shoot 70 people, and then a few minutes later, when the police arrived, the guy barely knew who he was. The first thing he asked the cop, according to an arresting officer, the only thing that he asked was, where am I, or what am I doing here? So somebody to be able to be in a state of mind where they can shoot 70 people in 90 seconds and then a few minutes later be halfway out of it and not even know where they're at. There's just so much fishy stuff going on, and none of these things are going to be brought up in his trial. It's just he's going to get railroaded. He's going to be strung up in the middle of town for everybody to basically, have their lynching, their public lynching, and the people are going to get what they want. The politicians are going to get what they want. But the truth of the situation, is just like, John F. Kennedy, 9/11, the Columbine shooting, Oklahoma City bombing, all of these incidences that have major effect to change society, the truth of what really happened is probably never going to be known.
Yeah, and now that they're putting gag orders on everything and sealing everything, it'll be locked away in a vault for 50 years. And I'm sure they'll... when it's really shady? If they evoke national security, if you even hear that term brought up. And, again, I'm really surprised that they haven't mentioned the word lone wolf or terrorist. I mean, maybe once or twice here or there, but not anything like you would expect them to actually be running around going, you see, look. They've been pushing the gun control aspect. We need to ban guns. We need to ban guns. I mean, so that does show, that's a red flag. That kind of shows that they had things prepared beforehand and what they were going to aim at. Certain things like amount of ammo and the capacity of the magazines and certain weapons and things like that.
which is exactly what they did with Columbine as well.
Yeah, same thing, and it's very shady. It happened, in the not too far away. It's in this area of Colorado. Well, Colorado itself is like NSA, CIA, Black Ops Central, apparently, and that's what the Denver International Airport's supposedly the headquarters of the New World Order or whatever, or one of their runaway spots. So who knows? You got that the former Air Force base that's run by the CIA out there. That's not too far away. I mean, perfect spot to have a attack of a lone gunman masked nut. I mean, Nathan, look out! You can't have guns because this guy had one and killed people, but nobody else was armed. Don't pay attention to that, though. Don't pay attention to the fact that it happened in a gun-free zone. You don't see that thing happening. You don't see the same type of thing happening in like downtown Miami, because there wouldn't be 12 people dead and 70-something injured or whatever, or 59 injured or whatever it was. You wouldn't have that many because half the people in the movie theater would have returned fire without even thinking about it. And other questions abound. Why was he wearing body armor and he didn't get into a gunfight at all? It was him busting in, shooting innocent people that were not armed and didn't have any armor, and then he put his arms down and chilled out and waited for the cops. Didn't engage them, nothing, and then they didn't engage him either, which is equally as weird. Now, you're familiar with courts and stuff. Don't you find that a little odd that the cops didn't engage him at all the way they would, per se, I don't know, like a 65-year-old lady who didn't want to sign her ticket?
I would just have to say that from top to bottom, this entire thing stinks. And, like I said, we'll probably never know the truth. And with all the gag orders being issued, it's pretty evident that they don't want us to know the truth.
I agree 110%. No matter what, they don't want us to know what's going on. And we could spend all day talking about this, but I want to get on to other things because there's more important things to talk about. And, I'm glad that you were able to give me a little bit of your time to go over that, because I haven't gotten a chance to talk to you off air about it, and I've been dying to get your opinion on it. So, sticking in the theme of courts, there's a big problem nowadays with the predatory. I don't even want to call it just a court system, because it's almost like a revenue generation system. I mean,
That's
I know
exactly what it is.
I know that they call it court, but I wish we could call it something else. We should come up with new names for things and start to put it out into, I guess, popular culture or whatever, and try to change the lexicon so people understand what things really are instead of using the wrong terms. And we should come up with new things to describe things accurately, and then we should start to reuse the language in the proper context, I think, for real. Otherwise, we're headed for disaster, because we live in the land of idiocracy. And I think that's one of the reasons why this revenue-generating machine can get away with what it can, because people don't know the laws. In fact, you pointed out the last time you were on, man, that some guy saw your client go up, and it happened. I guess your client went up first, or was one of the first people to go up, and the people behind him saw what he did and started to emulate it, and it ended up everybody's cases got thrown out of court because of that was related to the one officer that happened to be involved, and all it took was one person paying attention to what you and your client were doing in court. And once you start to actually pay attention, the game. I mean, like you said, it's not like some of these people say, I walked in, the judge bowed, and poof, the charges went away. It's not that easy. You explained that the last time you were on. It's not that simple. But I think once you know about this stuff and you have an idea, you're better armed. So let's start, I guess, with the court system. We got a few minutes before we go to break, but before we go to break, let's touch on what would be the best way for someone to protect themselves when they have to deal with either the police or the court system. What's the first thing? And we can get into it more on the other side, but what's like the one, in a few minutes, what's the one simple thing you could say to keep yourself out of trouble when dealing with either the police or in a court of law?
I'll say that there's no way to actually keep yourself out of trouble, because once these people set their sights on you, they've got their sights on you, and they don't quit until they absolutely have to. But the one thing to put up an effective defense is, it goes back to what we were just talking about when you said, instead of using the words that they use, let's try and use words that are more accurate. Instead of using the reality that they want us to live in, start looking at reality for what it really is. I think, I can't remember exactly who it was, but they said if you want a nation of slaves, the best way to do it is to take away their ability to reason and to take away their ability to realize things that are contradictory in reality. And when you're going through court, when you're going through anything with the legal system, they're throwing a whole bunch of things that are just not consistent with reality at you. And when you accept those inconsistencies, when you accept the fictions that they're trying to use against you, they'll be able to hem you up quite easily. But when you start calling them on the contradictions, when they say one thing and it's not reality, and you're able to apply reality, if you're able to apply the facts to what's going on instead of using their rhetoric, that's when you're able to put up the most effective defense, because these people are using 100% fiction to come after you. Everything that their authority, their laws, their jurisdiction, every single thing that they're coming after you with is figments of the imagination. And if you can counter those contradictions of reality with fact, that really leaves them in a very vulnerable position. And more often than not, the most effective or the easiest thing for them to do is to just get you out of there before anybody else realizes. Because if someone else realizes and tries to emulate, chances are they're going to lose a whole docket full of money.
And that's a lot of money to lose. I wonder how many thousands of dollars actually walked out of that courtroom that day. That would have been interesting to be able to tally that up and figure out how much money they lost. Because I know rough estimate, it's like $5,000 per I think minimum somewhere around like $5,000 per person that gets into the system and end up making off them in fines and fees and stuff. So if 10 people walked out, there's what, $50,000 right there? Ouch. Well, ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Tonight I'm hanging out with Nathan Fraser, a.k.a. Paranoid, who is a host here on the Orion Talk Radio Network, but he is so much more than that. I would call him, at the very least, a wealth of knowledge, probably the same size as what the Vatican has stored underneath their little empire there. Nathan, during the break we were chatting, and I want to kind of steer the direction of the conversation right now towards this, but we were chatting about the inconsistencies of reality versus what they try to tell you is reality, and they meaning the law society, with statutes and all this other crap. And people really, they don't know, people have no clue. They don't even know the basics of, like, if you sign a ticket, you're literally agreeing to physically represent a corporation, which you aren't, and you're pretty much giving up your constitutional rights, blah, 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 blah. People don't even know that basic, and that's like a basic level of, compared to some of the other things that and other ways that we contract our way, or we put we contract ourselves into with the government and this law society without even knowing about it.
Well, and see, that's one of the things that I actually have a point of contention with, is that the idea, and it's heavily promoted, the idea that what's going on is contract, and we're contracting ourselves into things ignorantly. But one of the things about a contract is a contract has to be made knowingly. It has to have full disclosure, and both parties have to come to a meeting of the minds. It's a bare essential element for all contract law. And when people don't know what's going on, then you really can't say that there's a contract even there. It's really just, you could almost say it's an adhesion contract, but adhesion contracts under that condition are just not applicable. It's null and void. So even if it was a contract that was going on, the fact that they don't offer any kind of consideration, so they don't actually bring anything to the table, when you get pulled over, if they say that by signing the ticket, you're entering into a contract with them, or you're granting them jurisdiction, which is a heavily promoted idea, it's still not based on reality. A contract means that both parties are bringing something to the table, which when you get pulled over by a police officer, you're the only one bringing anything to the table. You're saying, I'm going to go and I'm going to perform all these actions for you. And if you decide you're going to take money from me, I'm going to give you money. And what are they going to do for you? Not shoot you? I mean, that's not a very fair contract. Secondly, a contract is made on a voluntary basis. Anybody has the right to walk away from a real contract. If I came to you and I said, hey, Popeye, let's contract for this, this, and this, and you said, no, I'm not really feeling that, I'm not going to do it, I don't have the right to point a gun at you and be like, you'll sign this contract or else. But the police do have that right. So on its face, they say that it is a contract, and a lot of people will promote that, but that's another one of the fictions. Does it really fit the rules of what a contract is? And no, it doesn't. And everything that these people are doing, the idea that all law is contract law is very heavily promoted. But then when you actually apply what is necessary, the necessary elements for a valid contract, they're never present in what these people are doing. So realistically, that's one of the things that is promoted but doesn't really match reality. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, the whole reason we have a judicial system is supposed to be to protect people's rights. The whole reason we have government in general is supposed to be to protect people's rights. It even says so in the Declaration of Independence. It says all men, are blessed with inalienable rights granted to them by their creator, and governments are established amongst those men to protect those rights. So that's the point of having government in this or on this continent, at least in the propaganda. That's the point of having government. Yet these people violate more rights than anybody. These people live off of stolen money. These people point guns at us and tell us how to live our lives. And when you go into a court, you're supposed to get a fair trial from an impartial decision maker. A real quick way to lay it out is to say, say me and you had a dispute about something and I felt like you had wronged me. Well, if we went into court and the judge was your uncle, you had some sort of relationship with the judge, there's no way that I could expect an honest and fair trial from somebody who is a fair and impartial decision maker, because he obviously has a vested interest in finding in your favor. Well, that's what happens every single time you go to criminal court. You're going to court. The party coming against you is the state or the city, and the party who's deciding is also the state or the city. So the city is the plaintiff, and the city's coming after you, the defendant, and then the judge also represents the city, and the judge is getting paid by the city, and the judge gets paid less money if he finds less people guilty. The more guilties that he gets, the bigger his paycheck is going to be, the bigger the amount of money for everybody in the city to be able to pull out of is going to be. So if somebody's getting paid off of your guilt, if somebody's got a vested financial interest and a vested relationship type of interest with one of the two parties, there's no way that there can be a fair trial. But in every single criminal case, and this is from speeding tickets all the way to murder, the judge actually represents one of the two parties and actually gets money off of finding people guilty. So you can, in the way our legal system is set up now, if you ever go to court for a criminal proceeding, you will never get a fair trial. That's one thing that you have to understand. And they tell you that the judge is there to be an impartial decision maker. They tell you that you have the right to fair trial. But when you really look at what's going on, the propaganda says you have the right for a fair trial, but reality, the facts of what's going on, blatantly prove that you have no way of actually ever getting a fair trial. And that's just one example of where what they say and what we often repeat, the reality that we have in words, doesn't match the reality that we have in facts.
And there is, in fact, no victim in most of these quote-unquote crimes. I mean, for something to really be a crime, on a technicality, I guess here, doesn't someone have to be a victim in this? So when you have a victimless crime of, having blue lights on your license plate, which I see people literally, that sounds stupid, but I know people that have gotten pulled over and arrested for things like that because they have little marker lights on their license plates, or the little, the lights that give it like the glow effect underneath the car. Ground effects too low, things like that. I mean, I've literally seen people get pulled over and hassled by police for that, as if they were Al Qaeda and they had just bombed New York City. Ridiculous. And there's no victim. And you point out you have who is the other party that's pretty much the accuser, and that's the state or the city, and you have the judge acting as an agent of that. So there's really nothing impartial there. It's not like the judge is some impartial godlike figure, which they've actually, they've pulled it off with precision, that they get people to believe that a judge comes from, when all of a sudden you become a judge, you're some, you're in a different category other than human or something, I guess. You know what I mean? Like all of a sudden you're all knowing and omnipotent, and people don't realize the reality of the situation. And you're right, man. It catches them like fishing nets. Just scoops them right up. And, I'm sure they know that some people will get their way out and get through. But even the people that get out and get through, you never get out of court without paying some sort of court cost at the very minimum. I mean, I had a ticket where the police officer accused me of reckless driving and everything. And when I showed up for court, he dropped it because he was kind of, they were being, they were told that they had to issue tickets at this certain intersection that day. So they were just giving them out. And he told me personally that if the day I went to court, if I showed up and my license was clean, he was like, I won't pursue it. And he was a man of his honor. When I stood up, he was like, nah, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So the judge said to me after looking at everything, he said, well, I feel bad that I even have to charge you, but I'm going to have to charge you a court cost. Even though I didn't get, you know what I mean? There was no points, I still had to pay. So the officer had said, yeah, it was, drop it, done, whatever. And I don't remember the exact wording that he used or how he did it, but it was really quick. And because of that, there was no ticket, no nothing on my record, yet I still had to pay $200 and something to the court before I left that day. Otherwise, I probably would have been found in contempt or whatever they would have said, and probably locked me up in lieu of me giving them the $200 and I think it was $20 or whatever.
Well, see, and that kind of points out what's really the agenda. There's two things that are going on in court, and the two things that we have a legal system for. They say that we have a legal system to keep us protected from the criminals, to keep us protected from the bullies and the thieves and the rapists and whatever, but that is not what the legal system is there for. The legal system is there for two main things: to establish in the minds of people that there's a ruling class that has the right to tell us how to live, and the other reason, which you found out very, very explicitly, is to fund that ruling class, to give them money, to make sure that they're able to live higher on the hog than we are. That's the whole point of having a legal system, is to keep the people that make the rules divided and living comfortably and far away from the people who have to follow the rules. And even that right there is a blatant I can't even think of the word, but it's a blatant inconsistency of reality. Reality does not say that certain human beings are allowed to make rules and other human beings have to follow them. That is absolutely nowhere in human nature. Yet, when it comes to the legal system, people believe that that's fine. And it's like you were mentioning earlier, no victim, no crime. The whole reason that we have this system is to keep people protected when they're aggressed against. If someone does you wrong, you need some sort of way to redress it and get yourself remedy. And that's what the whole point of the court system is supposed to be there for. That's the justification of it. But then when you actually go to court and you watch how many people go through for what you called victimless crimes, you start to realize that that is not what the court is there for. The court is there specifically to enforce one group of people's will upon the rest of the people and to collect money from the rest of the people to keep that one group of people living high on the hog. And that's the only reason that we have a judicial system whatsoever, in my opinion.
It's predatory in nature. If you actually ever been in court and seen anybody go through it, and I would consider an expert on the subject matter with all of your experience, and I'm sure you understand. Anybody, you know what, you'll back this up. I'm sure if anybody sits and takes even the slightest amount of time to pay attention to what's going on, you can't come to any other conclusion other than it's predatory in nature by its very design. So when people say, "Oh, the justice system is broke," it's not broke. You think it's broken because your concept of what it is for is warped and is not really what it is about. It's not it's not even a reality. It goes even deeper than that. It's so the facade. That's the word I'm looking for. It's a facade. What you see is a twisted facade compared to what is the true nature, and it's just predatory. They, and it's like they lay in wait and they go, "Come, Nathan, I'm your friend. Come, look, I have flowers. I'm peaceful. I like you. I'm here to protect you." I mean, people. I see people fall into it, and a lot of times, you see these people for whatever reason they have an attitude problem. They're young punks, whatever, gang people. You see them mouthing off to judges and mouthing off in court and "screw you, judge," and everything else, and the judge just, if you notice, that's the only time when you see something on mainstream television, that's the only time you ever see anyone ever standing up to a judge, is they show you the crazy people who stand, I know I shouldn't say crazy, but maybe people that are pissed off or high or what, what I'm talking about.
Belligerent.
Yes, belligerent. And they only show that. They never show someone like you talked about, your client, or the guy that followed behind him. And they don't ever show that because, like you said, they've learned to not let you go first because they don't want to lose an entire courtroom of people. So they kind of make you wait till last because you know what you're talking about. They don't want anybody in the courtroom to see it. So they don't want anybody in the country or anywhere around the world, because the court systems are pretty much the same around the world. It's a facade. It's all revenue generation. It's predatory in nature, and if they didn't have a way to penalize you and extract money from you, they wouldn't live in their big houses and have their limousines.
Yeah, and realistically, like you said, people look at the system and they say, "Oh, it's broke, it's not working the way it's supposed to." And that right there is the cognitive dissonance. That's where people are taking the brainwashing, the propaganda, the words that they've been fed. We have a judicial system that's fair and impartial. They're taking what the words have told them is reality, and then they're looking at the facts of what is reality, and they don't want to give up the fiction. They don't want to give up the lie. So what they say is they try to overlay the lie to the facts and say, well, the reason the facts aren't adding up is because something is wrong, something is broke, and we need to get it back to the fiction. And they don't want to accept the facts of the matter. And the facts of the matter is, all the judicial system is a small group of people saying, we're going to tell you how to live your life. We're going to point guns at you if you don't do what we say, and we're going to steal your money all along the way. And it's one of my favorite quotes of my own, and it's just an impersonation of somebody from the government. And this is anybody from the legislative, executive, or judicial branch of the government. And this is a great impersonation as far as I see it is, "Hi, I'm from the government. I'm here to protect you from thieves and bullies. Now give me your money and do what I say." And that's really what it is. They say, "We're here to protect you from thieves and bullies," and then they turn around and they are the thieves and bullies. But most people will only pay attention to what is being said. They don't want to look at the actions, because if what's being said to them from authorities doesn't match the reality, the actions of what's going on, most people, and it's just a sad fact of human beings, most people will choose to ignore the reality and choose to accept the words as reality. And that's when they look at the system and they say, well, it's broke, there's something wrong with it, we need to fix it, because they don't want to admit to themselves that the facts don't match reality, and they don't want to live in the facts. They don't want to live in reality. They want to live in the fiction, in the words. And
how sad is that, man? That there's people that will actually, like, they would prefer to live in, take the, what was it, the blue pill made you go back to sleep, if I remember correctly. What was the guy's name in the first Matrix? He was sitting there having the steak with Agent Smith, and he's like, I know this isn't real, but it tastes so good. I can't wait, make me whatever, I don't care. I don't want to ever remember this reality. This is BS, whatever, blah, blah, blah. There's really people that are like that. They would rather not know. I mean, I've met people that have unplugged, and maybe not gone all the way, hardcore with their research into, like, the Satanism aspect, but at least they understand about 9/11 and world government and all this other stuff. And that's too much for them, man. They have to unplug because it's too much. They'd rather live in the world of reality television, or, what they call reality television, this crap that you see on TV all the time, and, Dancing with the Stars. To them, that's comfortable because that's safe. Because to them, that's, nothing bad happens there. Once in a while, bad things happen, but the government, in that reality, they love me.
And to be completely fair and honest, and not to justify what those people do, but just to give, if you're looking at that situation and you can't understand why, you have to understand that from kindergarten through whenever you graduate college and even further on, that mindset is beat into you. When you first go to school, the first thing that you learn is there's 30 of us children. We have certain rules. We can't hit, we can't yell, we can't order each other around. And then there's this one person in the room who can hit, who can yell, who can order us around. And they teach you when you're in school, you've got all these rights, you're an individual and whatever. And then they say, sit down, turn around, don't talk, don't pass notes. So they teach you, that you're free and everybody's equal, but then their actions do the exact same thing. And it's just like Pavlov's dogs. When you overwhelm somebody with inconsistencies, the easiest thing is for them to just shut down and no longer try. And it's a great way to create mindless slaves.
That's one of the reasons they pump out so much crap on TV and everything. And they have so many differing views with CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News. And each one of those networks has a host that goes off the deep end and gets and literally it's a great point that you bring that up, because what they're doing is they're overloading people with so much. You see it now all the time. People go, I can't deal with this. I need to walk away. I know people that they just get so frustrated they'll walk away, and I'm not talking for a day. I take mental health days from this sometimes. I work 7 days a week doing this, so I get it. Sometimes you got to unplug. But there are people that are literally just say, I'm out, and they quit. And it's because they need, they get so overloaded with info, no matter what it is. And it could be coming from a lot of sources. And that's another reason for a lot of the disinformation. Not only does it sow distrust amongst different groups and stuff, and confuse people. But again, it overloads their mind. And what happens, like you said, when people are too overloaded, they just go, you know what? I'm out. I'm checking out. I'm going to be in the field with the daisies and the butterflies if you need me, okay? I'm checking out. Thank you. Peace. And then they're a drooling moron. And that's what we're left to deal with. And again, it's operant conditioning. Charlotte Iserby talks about this. I interviewed her. The deliberate dumbing down of America. You can tell my public education's coming out. They use operant conditioning, and Skinner's box is now the computer. And, she called in the 80s. She said they were going to get rid of books and they were going to use computers and small handheld computers. And back then they didn't have laptops and stuff. And they were like, Charlotte, you're insane. And now they're giving kids notebook computers and iPads. And they're getting rid of books. They're getting rid of textbooks. I mean, it's all going to be like PDF format and stuff. Dude, I could go in and change things on a PDF if I wanted to. I mean, look what they did with 1984, An Animal Farm on Kindle. Amazon overnight one night just decided to delete it from the Kindles because they said that they had some sort of copyright issue or whatever, and they shouldn't have sold it. So they deleted it off of they went into people's Kindles who had purchased it and literally deleted it off their Kindle overnight. They gave them their money back, but the fact that they could go into your Kindle and take stuff off like that shows you the kind of control that they have with that technology. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Hour number 1 flew by. Hour number 2 coming up. Don't go anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye, from federaljack.com. And joining me tonight is Nathan Fraser, a.k.a. Paranoid, who... Nathan, go ahead and shamelessly plug your show really quick, because I completely forgot in the first hour to plug when you're on. I know you're on Saturdays, but plug the time that you're on.
Yeah, I'm actually right here on Orion Talk Radio Network on Saturdays at this exact same time slot. So 10 o'clock till midnight on the East Coast. And we're here every single Saturday night. And also, if you want to check out my website, I just got a brand new, thankfully, I've got listeners that are super, super awesome and help carry the burden of keeping the show archived and available for free. So one of the listeners actually just paid for a new website, and that's Danielle. She helped me pay for a new website. And so I got livefreefm.com. That's the name of the show, Live Free FM, followed by a .com. And I'm slowly getting all the archives up and posted there. I used to host them, all the archives over at TalkShoe, and I've just been having so many problems with TalkShoe for hosting lately that I needed to have an actual host on my website. So she paid for that, and that's up, and I'm slowly getting all the archives up there. So if you guys want to check out more from me, go to livefreefm.com or tune in every Saturday night on Orion Talk Radio from 10 o'clock till midnight.
Very good. And ladies and gentlemen, I must say, Nathan is, he really gets your gears going. During the break, we were just conversating, and he got me, he opened, I told him, I said, oh, you just opened Pandora's box in my head, because we were talking about copyright law. And Nathan, I'll get your take on copyright law in a sec, but you really brought up a good point. These 3D printers, because we were talking about how they could print out organs and stuff with these things, and you said, what about copyright law? Because people could print out whatever they wanted. If they wanted to, there was a cartoon character they liked. We'll reach out to the 30-somethings that watch Adult Swim, right? They like one of these Adult Swim shows, and say they don't have a toy, and these man boys want to get a toy of their favorite character or whatever. Well, they, instead of going and spending $25 or $30 on one of these overpriced pieces of crap at a memorabilia place, they could just print one out. Or they could print out a camera, or they could print out a computer tablet, or a computer, or a firearm, or a cell phone, or a radio board, or anything. Because, like you were saying, there's different cartridges they could fill it with, and different fibers and stuff. I mean, if they can make a living, functioning human organ with one of these 3D printers, isn't that like the achievement of achievements? You created life. That means you can pretty much create inanimate objects, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And what we were talking about is when it comes down to it, and this is my take, and I hate to admit it, but I'm one of those man boys that you kind of speak of. I'm a total comic book nerd, and I just haven't been able to give up that part of my childhood yet.
It's okay, dude. I'm kind of I still have some nerd in me from when I'm a Halo geek. Even though I know the story is New World Order-ish, I have Master Chief's head, a bust of it. So I have a little geek in me. It's all good. I get it.
So from where I was thinking is, I write and draw my own comic book, and I thought it would be super cool to get a 3D printer and be able to print up, instead of having to go to some toy manufacturer and pay to have my toys for my comic book made in China, and have to buy hundreds of them in bulk at a time to be able to, try and make a profit off of them. If I had a 3D printer, I could print them out myself, paint them myself. And then that gets into, from there, say there's, I guess, Ninja Turtles, the Ninja, and out of all the comic book stuff, Ninja Turtles is the one. I even have Ninja Turtle tattoos. I swore I'd never get cartoon characters tattooed on me, but I've got Ninja Turtle tattoos.
Bro, everybody has a stupid tattoo, trust me. I'm covered in tattoos. I have a few stupid ones.
Yeah, and I love Ninja Turtles. And a few years back, they put out these Ninja Turtle toys that were based off of the original comic book series, and they were so freaking awesome, but I don't really afford myself the luxury to buy things like that anymore. I don't really buy toys or action figures or stuff like that anymore. But they would be cool to have. And if if I was, if I had access to a 3D printer and a program like Google Sketch or even Photoshop now has 3D functions in it. So you could make a design in your Photoshop or your Google Sketch, and then you could print it out on your 3D printer. And if people could get the specs for those collectible toys, then other people could print those out, and it'd be the equivalent of a cubic zirconium. But the people that own the copyrights for that toy, say Mattel or Playmates or something like that, as soon as people are starting to print out their own ones, it's gonna decrease the demand for the ones that they hold the copyright for, and there's going to start being, and I see this happening in the very near future, because according to my speculations, and I've been following 3D printers for the last couple of years, from where I see it going, I would say in less than 5 years, anything you can buy on the shelves, you'll be able to print out at home if you've got a 3D printer.
What if they incorporated human cloning with this thing, dude? Because think about it. What happens if they with a computer, they essentially build what they decide is the perfect human being on a computer model using 3D rendering, which obviously anybody that's ever seen any movies with any digital effects knows you can do, right?
Right.
So say they do this Hollywood style, perfect human being or whatever, and they decide that they want to try to create one of these, the old super soldier, as it were, and they try to print one of these things out using cloning technology, mixing it with this, 3D printing technology, maybe on a bigger scale, and they start printing out drones, literally human flesh, blood sacks with no, I guess, soul, just soulless drone humans or humanoid creature. I mean, it sounds science fiction-y, but the fact that they're already we're years beyond splicing animals and humans together. This isn't something that they wouldn't have tried. They probably haven't tried already. It's just creepy to think that if you can print out a human heart or a kidney, again, that's life. You've brought some, an organ, a living tissue, a piece of living tissue. You've replicated that. I think once you've replicated that, I think making a set of speakers or, a CD or an action figure isn't going to be too hard. I'm sure that it would be hard to probably figure out a way to create things like CDs and stuff like that right off the bat, because you'd have to have a way to put all the music tracks and everything in there. But I bet you somebody could figure out a way real quick to make a digital CD and a 3D, version of it, and a way to figure out how to print it. And it would probably be a civilian, because if it was, if the copyright law came down and they started locking that down, then it would go on black market, it would go underground, and it would probably be some civilian black market underground technology that would end up getting exploited, because that happens a lot too. Yeah,
I don't know if CDs would be very feasible, because CDs are so cheap anyways, there'd be no need to create a black market for them. But
like a computer full with $3,000 worth of software or whatever on it, that would probably be a little harder to replicate. But something simple like a gun would probably be easy, or
a pair of shoes that has the Nike logo on it.
Oh yeah, there you go, pair of shoes.
Yeah, or
clothes.
I've seen, yeah, and that's what it's. Right now it's in its infant stages, but as it goes, it's going to get better and better. And pretty soon people are going to start making cell phone covers, or people are going to start making all kinds of different things, and they'll be able to compete. We'll actually have a free market on those things for a little while. But then, of course, what the government is there for, to protect the ruling class, we're going to start seeing them come down and use copyright law to stop the free market. A lot of people say, oh, America, that they're a perfect example of why capitalism doesn't work. We do not have capitalism here. We have a merger of corporations and government, and we have corporate fascism, where the giant corporations use the government to stop free market, to stop competition, to ensure monopolies. People think that government is there to stop monopolies, but government is actually there to uphold monopolies.
The government is the monopoly.
Government isn't everything that, you think of everything government does, government has a monopoly on it. Space travel, government has a monopoly. Protection, Government has a monopoly.
Well, yeah, unless you're Richard Branson, but very true. I mean, the only Richard Branson, someone who is affiliated with these dirtbags, he's the only other person that can fly into space on his own. Nathan and I can't be like, bro, what are you doing Saturday? Nothing. I'm getting in my rocket, bro. I'm going to the moon. You want to go hang out in the dark side of the moon for 6 hours? Yeah, let's go, dude. We can't do that.
But even him, he has to go and ask the government for permission. He has to follow
that's true.
the government's rules. So
he has to go beg the queen, can I fly my airplane into the solar system? Can I fly out of the earth?
And that's what we were talking about earlier, and that's what I really like to get into is just the sheer hypocrisy that one human being should have to go ask permission from another human being to fly in their thing that they built themselves. That right there shows the huge disconnect. How does the Queen have the right, or the President of the United States, how does that person have the right to grant you the ability to do something? That right there shows how disconnected from reality people are. If you can fly, you have the right to fly. If you can do something without injuring somebody else, you have the right to do it. And if somebody else can grant you that right, if you honestly believe that somebody else can grant you that right, where did they get the power to grant you that right? And how do they have that power and you don't? You're both human beings. And that's what I was talking about earlier. When you learn in school, everybody's equal. But then when you look at reality, some people have to ask permission from other people as if those people have some sort of magical superpower to them that gives them the right to delegate rights to other people. And that's why people as a whole are so headed down a downward spiral, because we try to live in reality, but our minds are so distracted with all of these fictions. And the whole legal system is based off of that fiction. The whole legal system is based off of the fact that some people can tell other people how to live. Some people have the right to take money from people when they don't follow their orders. And these people represent this magical thing called a state that doesn't really exist, but it exists because they tell us it does, and that's where they get their power. And it's like, well, who do you represent? I represent the city. Well, what is the city? Well,
yeah, what gives the city the power? Like, who ordained them from the creator? Did whatever creative forces out there, whatever you call it, did this universal energy come down and say, the city of Akron, Ohio can tell you that what to eat and what to wear. I, as the creator, ordain it. Poof. No. So then, where do they get their authority from? Where does that authority come from? It's not even real.
It's not even real, and that's the thing, and that's why I say cognitive dissonance. People live in the false reality where other people have power over them, and that's their mentality. So it becomes their reality. But the facts are, nobody has the right to tell somebody else what to do. That's the simple fact. Unless it's, leave me alone, or I'm going to shoot you if you don't stop doing what you're doing to me. Other than that, you don't have the right to tell somebody else how to live their life, or what to do, or what to spend their money on. And all of government relies, from the judicial system to the executive branch to the Congress, all of it relies on a house of cards, a house full of lies, that some people have the right to tell other people how to live their lives, and some people have the right to collect money from you that you earned and decide how your money is going to be spent. And it's not true. And the most effective way that I found in court is to just bring up the fact, because these are things that nobody ever talks about. Nobody ever tells you about it in school. Your parents never talk about it. Your friends never talk about it. When you go to court, nobody has ever talked about this to the judge or to the bailiff or to the police officer. But when I bring it up, because I'm not arguing, well, I'm not a fiction, I'm not a corporation, or I'm not a straw man, or I'm not contracting with you. I never take that approach. All I take up is the approach of, you say that you have the right to tell me how to live my life. Where exactly did you get that right? Do you have facts and evidence to prove that you can tell me what I can smoke? Do you have facts and evidence to prove that you can tell me what kind of lights I can put on my car?
But Nathan, I have this nifty costume with this piece of tin on my chest. It says right here, look, it says police officer. Doesn't that mean anything? I mean, I have a costume, right?
And that's exactly what it is. It's a costume. And when they when they don't use that, they say, well, we've got this piece of paper. This Constitution gives us the right. This statute gives us the right to tell you how to. A piece of paper? Oh, so somebody wrote something down on a piece of paper 200 years ago, and that gives you somehow someone writing something down on a piece of, what is it, a magical piece of paper that grants godlike authority from them to you over me? What are your facts to back that up? And they can't have, what it really comes down to, we've got guns, so shut the heck up and do what we say.
And then, cue false flag shooting to take away your guns, so now you don't have guns to protect yourself, and now they come in and they're the only ones with guns, and it's like it's like dealing with the mafia, basically, man. Seriously. Hey, we're here to protect you. I mean, my cousin Jimmy, he's a friggin' arsonist, and I wouldn't, Jimmy, he likes this neighborhood. I wouldn't want him to come by and set your place on fire. But, if you give me like $300 a week, I can make sure that Jimmy never comes anywhere near this place. I promise. I'll never, but if you don't, I can't make any promises. That's basically what they do.
Except when the mafia gives you a deal like that, if you give them the $300 a week, you pretty much got to guarantee that Jimmy's not going to come and burn your place down. But when you give the government the money, you still don't have a guarantee, because someone's still going to fly a plane into your twin towers. Someone's still going to shoot up your movie theater. So you're basically, the mafia comes to you and says, "Hey, we'll offer you protection, even though it's a scam." At least they follow through. When the government doesn't follow through, and you're like, "Yo, we paid you to protect us. Can we get our money back?"
They beat the crap out of you.
Yeah. No, you can't have your money back. In fact, we're going to need more money.
In fact, cousin Jimmy's on his way to your house right now. He's going to burn the place down just because you got mouthy. You're right. At least to some degree, the mafia has a level of follow through with because you're giving them $300 a week. That would be destroying a cash cow if they just went ahead and did it anyway. They at least have some sense. But that just goes to show you that, not only do these people use this revenue-generating machine, for their own benefit, but the people that are doing it are just utterly psychotic. They're out of their friggin' minds.
Well, and you kind of have to be. To think that you can make decisions for millions of other people. I can barely handle the decisions that I make for myself. I don't want to make decisions and have them forced on at gunpoint on 6 million other people. But if you run for president, that's exactly what you want. If you run for judge, we create these positions of power where we say, hey, whoever sits in this seat will be able to live off of money that's taken from us forcefully. They'll be able to write crap down on a piece of paper and have men with guns force us to follow what's written down on these pieces of paper. What kind of people are going to be attracted to that type of position? It's only going to be psychotic maniacs that think that it's okay for people to write stuff down on pieces of paper and then order people with guns to go enforce it. It's in order to even want to do that, you got to have some sort of disconnect. Something's got to be wrong with the way that you see reality for you to even think that that's a proper role for humans to do to each other.
A lot of it, I find, falls into the whole worshiping of the false ego. And they don't realize that the ego is like a parasite that actually feeds off of them. And it becomes like this vicious cycle. And, people, they buy into power. What's the saying? Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. People get into some... I've seen it. Even I've gone through it. I'm not, Superman. I've been in positions where I was in charge in my life, whether it was if I was in the military or when I was a firefighter, and power can go to your head, and you have to learn to realize that that's not, don't fall into that ego trap like cops do. The costume, they literally identify with the costume, and that they literally physically embody the costume. So they literally, and not only is it just a costume that they animate for a certain period of the day when they're at work, but they end up actually believing and buying into it. And even when they're out of work, they're still in that that false ego character of I'm Johnny Law. I can do what I want. I'm not saying all cops are dicks, and there are some officers out there, whatever, that are good. Sheriffs that are good, but I'm talking about the ones that buy into the, I am this character that I play because I'm wearing this Halloween costume.
Well, and it comes down to, is it okay to point a gun at someone and tell them to do something? No, it's not. Is it okay if you're wearing a costume that says you represent this thing that doesn't even exist called the state? Yes, it is. So they forget that they're even human beings, and they start acting as if they have some sort of blessing from this thing that doesn't even exist.
Yeah, they buy into this whole false ego.
Yeah, and it exempts them from having to follow the same rules. And you say that power corrupts. I would say power not only corrupts, but it attracts the most corruptible amongst us. So not only does it take a good man and turn him bad, it attracts the bad man and makes him worse.
Very true, because people, like you said, what kind of individuals are attracted to that type of thing where, I'm going to be able to order somebody around and I can have one person kill another person at my whim, and you're right. That's why you see good, honest, well-meaning people don't want to get involved in politics. And they say, well, I don't want to get involved in politics. But then that throws up Plato's quote about, if you're not willing to get involved in politics, then be prepared to be governed by, the morons, the people that are, less intelligent than you, who are going to step up to the plate. And they might not have good intentions. And of course, I just paraphrased the hell out of that. But you know what I mean? It's the good people, the good-natured people don't by nature want to get involved in this because of what it is. But at the same time, because they don't get involved in it, look at the scumbags that it's going to attract the scum to begin with. And if you're not there filling the void, something's got to fill it. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back, final segment. And me and my mouth talked right into the break, as I do sometimes. I wasn't even paying attention to the clock. That was my bad. But luckily, I really didn't. You didn't miss much. You only missed a few things. So to reiterate what I said was pretty much, if you got good-natured people that don't. It's this weird. I guess you'd call it an enigma, or for lack of a better term, where you have this machinery of government, right? Because government really is just a machine to use to. It really means mind control, or control of the mind, literally. From two Latin words, verb and a noun. But government, the way I look at it right now, it's like a machine. It's being used, right? And you have these good-natured people that don't want to get in the driver's seat of this machinery because it's icky and covered in goo and nastiness and whatever reason they come up with, right? And of course, I'm being a little facetious, but they don't want to get involved for whatever reasons. So the good people who actually mean well and care about others don't get involved, right? Because I guess in its nature, it is an evil thing and it can corrupt you. And maybe on a deeper level, they understand that. So they shy away from it. But the problem is now there's a void in that machinery. Someone's got to operate it, right? So, and that's another argument in itself. But because it's there, someone is going to operate it because it's there. Not someone has to, but someone is going to operate that machinery while it's there. Now, if you don't step in and do it, that type of machinery in itself attracts these sociopathic scumbags, people that are psychotic, people that they have no compunction about killing little kids. They don't care. To them, it's they get off. Some of them get off on it. So you're gonna have them attracted to that type of mechanism to begin with. And if you, as a good person, don't go in there and try to do something, then there's going to be a void left, and someone's going to fill it, and it's going to be them. And that's pretty much what Plato was talking about in that quote. Now, it wasn't that in-depth. That's my modern-day twist on things. But that's the way you should look at it. Or at least that's the way I try to get people to look at things so they can understand things a little better. Now, the separate question of do we need the machinery to begin with? That's just a separate question. Believe me, I'm all for volunteerism. I've talked about this hundreds of times. But that in itself, I could have Nathan back on and we could do a whole show about that in itself. But the last segment here, I kind of want to devote to solutions because, we've done a pretty good job of pointing things out, and I like to point things out, and I know you do too, Nathan, but we both feel it's important to get at least some sort of a solution across to people and give them or show them not an idea, but the fact that there is a solution to this. And there is hope, for lack of a better term. I mean, I don't want to be all doom and gloom and be like, the world is ending, blah, blah, blah. So, solutions. What do we do? What are the solutions to what we've pointed out so far tonight?
Well, and I agree with you. The way I look at it is there's enough people out there running around talking about how the sky is falling. What am I going to do with my precious little amount of time? I think that I should devote myself and dedicate my time to finding umbrellas. If the sky is falling, which I'm not arguing with, does it really do good just to run around and it's an info war, there's war on for your mind, the sky's falling? I don't think that's very productive. Let people know the sky's falling, but also say, here's an umbrella. So when the sky starts falling, you're going to be protected. And that's the main focus of my entire life, actually, is to help bring people umbrellas. And that's what the main point of the show is. Live Free FM, the show I do here on Orion Talk Radio, is to bring people umbrellas. But that's really my main goal in life, is to show people, the sky is falling. Yes, that guy with the bullhorn, he's telling you the truth. But
why do I see an internet meme coming of you with an umbrella? I'm sorry. I just had this picture in my head, Nathan. Go on.
All right. So anyways, what are the solutions? We've been through this whole show, we've been talking about all of the inconsistencies, the areas where the facts of what's going on do not match up to the propaganda of what we've been told. Now, how do you take those facts and use them in a defenseful way? Like you were talking about, if you don't vote, only the people that are stupid and making bad decisions are going to vote. So really, the only justification for voting is a means of self-defense. Well, if you have to go to court and you understand all of these realities, all of these facts that contradict the propaganda, how do you go to court and use those facts in a form of self-defense? And the way that I approach it, and the way I approach everything dealing with these people, is the Socratic method, to ask questions. Socrates liked to teach people by asking them questions. Instead of saying, this is what it is, and drilling it into their head until they were brainwashed, he would say, well, what do you think? Think about this aspect, and this aspect, and come to your own conclusion. And so that's what I like to do when I go to court. I know that there's no way to get a fair trial. I know that the prosecutor and the judge are working for the same party. How do I get them to meet me at that point? And that's where asking questions comes in. And the best way to do that is to ask, when you get into there and before you've even entered a plea, I use their propaganda. I start at their propaganda, and then I narrow it down to a point where it shows that their propaganda doesn't match reality. So in the case of a judge and a prosecutor representing the same party and not being able to get a fair trial in a criminal case, I don't go in there and I say, well, I'm not going to go in there the normal teacher method. You represent the same party, and try and beat it into their head until they admit it. I'm going to use Socrates' method, which is asking questions. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to say, or ask, I guess is the proper word. I'm going to ask, am I entitled to a fair trial? And they're going to tell me yes, because that's part of their propaganda. Everybody gets a fair trial. All right, am I entitled to adjudication from an impartial decision maker? And they're going to say, yes, I'm an impartial decision maker. And then I'll say, okay, could I get a fair trial if there was a conflict of interest? And they're obviously going to say no. Well, like we were talking about earlier, the conflict of interest, if your uncle was the guy presiding, or if the guy presiding got money if one of the parties wins. Well, no, you can't. Obviously, you can't get a fair trial if there's a conflict of interest. And then ask them, well, who do you represent in this hearing? And then they're in a position where if they admit who they represent, they are admitting that they represent the same party that the prosecution represents. And if they admit that, they're admitting that you can't get a fair trial under them. And so instead of saying, I can't get a fair trial because you represent so-and-so and whatever, I ask them questions that lead them up to the point where they either have to admit it or they have to shut me up. And if they shut me up, they're denying me due process. And that's what I really want, is them to shut me up, because once they've done that, they've broken one of the biggest rules. And so, like, things like the straw man, things like the corporation, things like the contract, I can't find proof of all of those. They don't have any of that stuff ever actually written down anywhere. But the fact that I'm supposed to get a fair trial, it is written down. The fact that I need a fair and impartial decision maker, that's written down. The fact that they have to prove my presence within the state as part of an essential element for jurisdiction, that's written down. Like you were talking about earlier, all of these crimes that are victimless crimes, well, they have a legal word for that, and it's called corpus delicti. There has to be corpus delicti. Corpus delicti is the proof, the body of the crime, the proof of injury. And it's been ruled multiple times that they have to have corpus delicti in order for there to be a crime. So if they're charging you in criminal court, they have to have an injury. It's an absolute essential element. But I don't go in there and I don't say, well, there's no victim, therefore there's no crime. The way that I approach it is, I'll get the cop on cross-examination and I'll ask him, officer, did you witness me commit a crime? And the cop will say yes, and the prosecutor will allow him to say yes. And I'll say, officer, how many elements did that crime consist of? Because I know that in order for there to be a crime, there has to be corpus delicti. That's an essential element. And he will not be able to answer because, number one, he's a cop, and cops are not lawyers. They're not supposed to know these legal intricacies. But number two, if he knew that in order for there to be a crime, there has to be a victim according to multiple Supreme Court hearings, he wouldn't be writing tickets for expired plates. He wouldn't be writing tickets for ground effects being the wrong color. He wouldn't be writing tickets for marijuana possession, because all of those they don't fit the legal definition of a crime. But if I go in there and I say, well, there's no corpus delicti, there's no injury, therefore there's no crime, if I'm trying to beat it into their head, I'm not going to get anywhere. But if I ask questions that make them reveal the fact that the reality doesn't match the propaganda, before they admit that, they're going to shut me down. And that's what I want. Like I said, I want them to shut me down, because once they shut me down, they've denied me cross-examination. Once they deny me cross-examination, they've pretty much shot themselves in the foot. So I'm going to ask him, even if he does know how many elements are in the crime, then I'm going to ask him, what are those elements? And every single time that I've asked that question, the prosecutor jumps up and says, objection, that calls for a legal determination. My witness can't make legal determinations. And every single time, the judge says, sustained, this witness is not allowed to make legal determinations. And so at that point, I moved to have all of his legal determinations stricken from the record. The judge just made a rule for that case that this witness cannot make legal determinations. So I'm going to say, be consistent and strike every legal determination from the record. And the judge has to do it if he's going to uphold his own ruling, which they usually do. And then I say, I want the legal determinations that were on the ticket issued by this officer that is part of the record. I want those legal determinations stricken. He determined that I was speeding. He determined that there was a speed limit. He determined that I was not following the speed limit. He determined that that speed limit applied to me. All of those were legal opinions. Without those legal opinions, none of us would even be here. So if you're saying that his legal opinions are no longer valid in this court, and you're saying you're going to strike all of his legal opinions from the record, there is no case anymore. There's nothing. They have nothing to fall back on. And so really what it is it's not going in there and saying, you're doing this, this, and this. You're violating my constitutional rights. You're breaking this, and you're trying to charge me as a straw man, or you're thinking I'm a corporation. It's none of that stuff. It's asking them questions. I already know what the reality is. I know what the facts are. I know that what they're trying to do doesn't match those. How am I going to ask questions that get them to admit it, rather than me trying to shove my opinion of what's going on them? I'm going to lead them to my opinion to where they have no choice except for to admit the facts of what's going on. The same thing with statutes. You can ask a cop, officer, is it your opinion that I broke this statute? Am I here because you charged me of violating a statute? Well, yes, statute, whatever, of the penal code or whatever. Okay, officer, is it your opinion that that statute applies to me? Well, yes, of course. All right, would I be guilty of a crime if the statute did not apply to me? Because we all know statutes don't apply across the board. If I've got a piece of paper saying that I'm a medical patient for marijuana, the statute that says nobody can possess marijuana does not apply to me. So statutes don't just apply to everybody. The statute that says I can't have a fully automatic weapon doesn't apply to somebody who's in the military, or doesn't apply to a police officer, or doesn't apply to somebody with sovereign immunity. So statutes have to be applicable to the person. That's something that has to be proven. You have to prove that the statute is actually applicable to somebody, and they have to use the cop to prove that. Well, if I ask him, officer, is it your or is it your opinion that this statute applies to me? And he says yes. And then I ask him, factually, what is a statute? Which we were talking about earlier. A statute is just something somebody wrote down on a piece of paper. How does somebody writing something down on a piece of paper create an obligation upon me? How does it give them power over me? Is it a magical piece of paper? Do you have facts to prove that it's a magical piece of paper? No, none of those facts exist. So instead of saying, well, the statute doesn't apply to me anyways, I'm going to ask him, officer, does the statute apply to me? He's going to say yes. Is that a fact, or is that an arbitrary opinion? He's going to say, well, it's a fact. Statute applies to you. Okay, factually, what is a statute? And he's not going to know. He has no, if I asked you, Popeye, factually, what is a statute? Without our previous conversation, you'd be like, it's a law? And I'd be like, objection.
Oh, dude, for years, I thought that statutes were like laws and that you had to follow them. I had no idea that they don't even apply to us. They only apply to people in the law society. They don't even have anything to do with us. But we acquiesce to it.
Yeah, and to be realistic, they don't even really apply to the law society. That's who they should apply to, but they don't even apply to them. And that's what happens when you go to court.
In theory, they should.
In theory, exactly.
That's what I meant.
But when you go to court,
it's actually, in reality, in theory, it's one way, but in reality, it's another.
It's the opposite. And that's the whole thing is, in theory and in rhetoric and propaganda, it's one way, but in reality, it's the other. And I bring them to reality. I start with their rhetoric, I start with their propaganda, and through a series of questions, I bring them to reality. And I really have to give a big shout out to Mark Stevens, because he's the one that taught me all of this, and I've been using it successfully over and over again for the last 2 years in court. And I haven't won every single case, but at least 3 out of 4 cases I get thrown out. And it's really such a simple method. And once you understand the idea behind it, it's not having magic words, it's not having key phrases that will make them turn around and accept your sovereignty. It's nothing like that. It's just, this is what's real and this is what's being said. How do I start with what's being said, and through a series of questions lead them to the point where they have to admit what's real? And once you understand that, you can almost apply it to every single aspect of government and realize every single thing that government is doing, telling us what we can smoke, telling us how fast we can drive our cars, telling us how tinted we can have our windows, telling us what we can grow, telling us, all the way down to telling us how much money we have to pay, what kind of insurances we have to buy, what we have to pay for taxes. When you start realizing how this entire system is based off of fictions, because they believe that this thing that doesn't exist called the state gives them some sort of power. And once you realize that this thing called the state doesn't even exist factually, and legally it doesn't exist either, once you realize that the whole thing is based on a bunch of lies and it's based on a bunch of propaganda, and the reality of the situation is that everybody is sovereign, everybody is free, and everybody has the right to spend their money how they see fit and live their lives how they see fit, and nobody has the right to issue orders to their fellow human beings, whether they're a voter, which is how we all participate in the system. I'm going to vote for this because I don't think my neighbor should be able to do this. That is not reality. Or if you're a senator, I'm going to write a law that says this because I don't want the people doing this. that is not reality. And once you realize that all of this is based on fictions, and you understand how to go from the fiction and through a series of questions bring them to reality, it opens up your own mind and makes you realize how free you actually are and how free humanity should be. And then it gives you an actual goal to start working towards, instead of just running around saying, they're going to do this, they're going to do this, they've got this in the works, they're planning to do this. It starts you on a road where you say, this is what we need to do. This is where we need to go. This is the society that we need to start building. And it's so much easier to live your life not trying to react to every chess move that they make, and instead start playing your own game and start making your own moves.
Exactly. Make them
react to us.
Well, not even react. For I guess lack of a better term, make them obsolete.
Yeah.
That's really what we need to do. I mean, honestly, our evolution, which is, let's face it, it's inevitable, right? And we're evolving as a species. And these people that are in power, or they have access to this knowledge, we'll say, they understand this, and they're afraid of that evolution. That's why you see this lockdown coming, at least in my opinion. That's why you see this lockdown coming, and you see this push for it, because as more and more people wake up and realize the true nature of things, these people are freaking out. And a lot of people say, why? You think they're afraid that they're going to get hung? Honestly, some of them, yeah. But I think the ones that are more intelligent, a little more deep, I think they understand it on a deeper level than that. And I think it is a little deeper than that. I think that it's worse than that for them, because death, I guess, to a certain extent, they would still die some tyrant, right? You know, that had some sort of power, and they were powerful and tyrannical till their very last breath. Whereas I think their biggest fear, is not having any power and being completely and utterly irrelevant, which they are. And I think that's the best way to beat them, is to make them completely and utterly irrelevant. And that is going to entail not only a change of mind, but literally a revolution in your mind. Not a revolution of, there still is a way to stop things without being bloody. But the window is closing, unfortunately, and they're trying to push it towards this bad thing. And again, that's part of this facade. If everybody just changed the way they thought, tomorrow, this would be over. They would be irrelevant. If everybody realized the facade, the level of the game, dude, it would be over. That would be it. Can you imagine if everybody tomorrow just said, no?
And that's the thing. And you nailed it on the head. They are irrelevant. They are illegitimate. And their biggest fear is us realizing it. That's why there's all the propaganda. That's why there's all the patriotism, the flags, the us versus them, the Republicans versus Democrats, all of that stuff is there to keep us under the illusion that we need these parasites to guide humanity. And once you realize that they're irrelevant, that they have no more authority over us than we have over our own selves, that's their biggest fear. And that's what it is. Their entire authority comes down to belief. It's all the Wizard of Oz. It's all the man behind the curtain.
What do you think they were trying to tell us with that movie? Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. I am the great Oz. I am all powerful. I will punish you and kill you. Hey, don't go behind the curtain. Don't go there. Don't go there. And then you open it up and it's some little Weasley dickhead, with a microphone and video cameras and a control booth.
So can I give a plug real quick?
Yeah, go ahead. We got about 30 seconds. Go. Plug everything. Your show and your your website. Go.
The show is Live Free FM. It's on livefree.fm or livefreefm.com. And I have a book there, As King, A Simple Guide to Autonomous Living. And if you've been interested in anything that we've been talking about legally, read that book because it will blow your mind.
Nathan, man, thank you for coming on. As always, it's an epic show when you're on. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in, and I will see you all again Sunday, but make sure you stay tuned in all weekend to Orion. Ladies and gentlemen, as a special, I guess you could say treat, we're recording an after show because even 2 hours, most of my guests, 2 hours isn't enough time to get into the conversations we do. That's why they have to come back on multiple times. But tonight, Nathan and I were discussing things off air, and I just, I talked to him and I said maybe we should record this and add it as an addendum, because the information that we were flowing back and forth with each other was just, it was stuff that should have been brought up, but again, 2 hours isn't even enough time. So for your listening pleasure, here is the addendum to tonight's July 27th, 2012 episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Nathan Fraser and myself are going to continue the conversation, and we were getting into some pretty deep things, Nathan, so I'm going to give you the floor and let you go. It's all yours, brother.
Okay, so we were talking about Pavlov and the Pavlov's dogs experiments, and some people know what they are, but they're not fully clued into everything that Pavlov was doing, because a lot of Pavlov's studies were not officially released, and they're kind of hard to get your hands on. But I've actually read a lot of stuff that came from Pavlov, and I've looked at a lot of his studies, and it's a lot more intricate than people think. A lot of people know about the bell ringing and the meat and the salivary experiments where he would feed the dogs and he would ring the bell every time the meat came in, and the dogs would salivate. And then he found out that after they were trained to have that repetition, that if he would just ring the bell, then they would salivate even without the meat. So the meat was what people thought would trigger the salivation, but really it was the bell and the association of the meat and the bell. Pavlov also did experiments where he would beat dogs, and he would turn the light off and he would beat the dogs. The same dogs that he was doing the bell experiments on, he would do experiments with beating them with negative repercussions, with punishment instead of reward. And so just like with the meat, every time he rang the bell, he would give them meat and they would salivate. He would do other experiments with those same dogs where every time he flicked the light off, he would beat the crap out of the dogs, and the dogs would get real freaked out. And so after a while, they would associate, just like they would associate the bell with meat and start salivating. After a while, he found that he could turn the light off and their heart rates would just go through the roof. So they were associating the darkness with getting beat. And so he wouldn't have to beat them to get the response he wanted out of them. He could just flip the light off and he would get the response out of them that he wanted. And what was real messed up is he realized after continuing these experiments, he came to a point where he would turn the light off and ring the bell at the same time. And that would create conflicting responses in the dogs. The ringing of the bell would trigger a positive emotional response, and the turning of the light off at the same time would create a terrifying emotional response, and the dogs would just shut down. They would go into basically a live comatose state where they couldn't figure out which action to take. They had sensory overload. That's kind of what we were talking about in the show. But you were talking about how on the news you have one broadcaster saying one side of the story and another broadcaster saying another side of the story. But when you look at just one news story, if you just watch Fox News exclusively or you watch CNN exclusively, and you see all of the information overload is what Pavlov called it, when the dogs didn't know if they should be hungry or happy for the sound of the bell, or if they should be terrified from the fact that the light went off. It would cause sensory overload, and they would just basically shut down. Well, when you're watching news, even if you're not watching multiple different news sources, even if you're just watching one news source, the typical way that news goes is you'll have a very attractive human being, like a girl that's beautiful, and she's giving you the come F me eyes, and she's all done up, like a Barbie doll. And then in the background, you have a murder scene, and she's, you got this vision of beauty, and she's explaining to you how some woman just got gutted and left for dead in the park. And so you've got beauty, and then you've got atrocity right behind her. And then at the same time, you've got the sports ticker going on at the bottom, and it's telling you that your favorite team just won the World Series. And then right underneath that, you've got the stock ticker, and the stock ticker is telling you that you just lost 50 points in the NASDAQ. And then right underneath that, you've got the ticker saying that Obama's going to make you buy healthcare, and we're going to go start another war. And so you've got sensory overload. You've got positive, beauty, ugliness, negative. You've got sensory overload. You've got the the bells being rung at the same time that the light switch is being flipped off, and it causes people to shut down. And the way that the news is set up is deliberately set up to cause people to have sensory overload and then to shut down. So when you're walking around and you see all these people that basically live their life in a mode of being shut down, a lot of that is deliberate. They know that that will work. They know that when you give people so many different extremes of emotion at one time, it causes their brains to shut down and go into a sense of sensory overload. So they deliberately program the news to trigger that response. And then once people are in that response and they're in a form of shutdown, they're more susceptible. And so that way, once you've got one, if you're trying to present a version of reality that you want people to accept unquestioningly, the first thing that you have to do is get them to shut down their sensory intake, to shut down their ability to intake things and actually think about them. So you blast them with all different kinds of senses. You get them to be put in a sensory overload type of mind frame, and then you just feed them whatever you want their reality to be, and they'll unquestionably eat it up, gobble it up, and then it becomes their reality. And that's why we had these experiments that happened however many years ago, and now our news follows the exact same thing that he discovered back then. And that's how so many people, when we were talking about the Aurora shooting earlier, where all these things just don't make sense, but so many people that watch the news just buy it unquestionably. He was wearing a gas mask and nobody knows that it was actually him. When the police found him, he was dazed and confused. When the police talked to him, he warned them that there was bombs in his house. All of these things that don't make sense, that would make you say, okay, something's not right with this story, because of the way they deliver the story to you by first overloading your senses to where you can't rationally think about what's going on, then it makes it a lot easier to slip the narrative underneath that and make it to where you gobble it up hook, line, and sinker without actually thinking about what's going on.
And think about what you just said, the level of planning that goes into that. And people will say, oh, no. But yes, that's why they come at you with flashy graphics. And that, yeah, you ever notice it'll be something upbeat, and then all of a sudden Fox News does this all the time. It'll be like an upbeat story or something light. And then all of a sudden, dun 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 dun, and they have this like special breaking news music that they play, and then a graphic to go along with it. And that is all done to get you into, it's one second it's calm and peaceful, and the next minute it's horrific and horrible, or be afraid, and then all of this is being brought to you by either a wannabe Ken doll looking like human being that's obviously had way too much plastic surgery in case of most of the men, and even the women too. Most of the women, it's like they go out to the Playboy Mansion and they hire the first 5 bunnies that can speak a complete sentence, and they bring them on, and the only reason why they have these women on there is for sex appeal. Let's face it, and that's used in this conditioning, this way of getting people to be overloaded and accept the message at the same time, because any logical thought gets shut down because it's just too much, dude. I mean, they just get pounded, boom, 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 and you're hammered with that every day. You see, a loving puppy story where people will say, why is this even news? Where, a puppy was rescued from a creek today, and it's so happy and lovely, and it's so lovely, and then 16 people were slaughtered by a gunman, and blah 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 blah, and then they flash images of blood and guts and everything else, and they, we'd show you more, but we here at News 7 or whatever, we have some taste. Yeah, right. If you had any taste, you wouldn't be doing this at all.
Yeah. And then also there was one other thing that I wanted to expand on. Is that okay?
Shoot.
Okay, so I was really rushed during the last segment of the show, so I didn't get a chance to actually expand on this, but we broke down really well during the first part of the show how a state, at least factually, doesn't actually exist. The state is just an idea inside of the mind. Colorado, where I live, quote unquote, the state of Colorado didn't actually exist until 76, but the ground that I live on, that my house is built on, has existed for a lot longer. So the actual ground that people associate with the state is not really the state, because the state could unincorporate, the state could disappear, and the ground would stay there. The ground was there before the state existed. So the state really is just a mental fiction. It's just like Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola exists on paper, but it's not real. It's not something that you can point to something and say, there, that's Coca-Cola right there. Coca-Cola is just a bunch of people doing business as an idea called Coca-Cola.
When you look at it that way, the idea that the land is the state is kind of ludicrous. You have to, when you look at it and you understand where there were people here 5,000 years, 10,000 years ago, and this land, this physical land that you inhabit was here. You know what I mean? And I bring that up because it's interesting, because a lot of times you see land grants that, to like a land grant from the Indians to somebody from 1767 or 1768, and you realize, holy crap, that was before the Declaration of Independence. Wow, the land I'm standing on, that this house is, like if you're in a house that I'm in right now, physically dates back to before the birth of this country. I don't think people can comprehend that. They might look at it and go, isn't that interesting? But I don't think they comprehend what's actually being proven to them. You know what I mean? That, look, this is like an idea. That's all it is. It's some fictional idea that was put into a physical manifestation that is now the government. And people, the only reason why it's a physical manifestation is because people believe it.
Exactly. So it's not a physical manifestation. It's a fictional idea that gets attached to a physical manifestation. So the land is real, but the state factually is not real. So I said that the state factually does not exist, but I also said that the state legally does not exist. And I kind of wanted to explain that because I didn't get a chance to explain the legal aspect of what a state is. And a state legally is a body politic. So people will say, yeah, the state factually doesn't exist, but legally it does. And you're dealing with the law. When you go to court, you're dealing with legalese, legalities. You're not dealing with facts, even though they say that you are dealing with facts. But people will defend, well, factually the state doesn't exist, but legally the state does, because there was a legal process that created the state. But then you have to understand what a state is. And a state is a body politic. It's a group of people that come together and create the state. So the people are actually legally the state. But the way that a state works is the same way that all forms of government work. It's supposed to have a two-way obligation between the state and the citizens. So a state is a body politic made up of citizens, and citizens are members of that body politic, and they both owe each other something. So the citizens owe the citizens owe the state taxes and their obedience. The state gets to say, we're going to take your money and you're going to follow what we say. In exchange for that, in order to make it a reciprocal obligation or a mutually beneficial relationship, the state gets to take your money and tell you what to do, but in exchange for that, they're supposed to protect you. And that goes back to the very first type of government-structured organization of society, where there was a king or there was a shaman or whatever, and you gave him your 10% of what you farmed, or you gave him his knights would have the right to come and sleep with your wife on your wedding day or anything like that. You gave that to the king because he protected you from the other kingdoms, or he protected you from different things. So he offered some sort of law that would protect you from hooligans coming in and pillaging your land or something like that. And legally, this has been ruled multiple times that a citizen is a member of the body politic and a state is the body politic. And the citizen owes allegiance, which is basically obedience, and taxes to the state, and the state owes protection to the citizen. So in order for there to be a state, there has to be citizens, and in order for there to be citizens, there has to be an obligation of protection on the part of the state. But then when you look at what happens, what we have in this country and what we have in all countries, which don't even really exist, they're just plots of land. But what we have here and what we have everywhere else is we have the obligation to pay taxes and follow their dictates, but we do not have the protection. If you call the cops and tell them, hey, my house is getting broken into, I need someone here right away to stop this guy, and the cops say, not a big priority, we're not worried about it, and they show up 3 days later and you're already dead, your family has no right to go after them and sue them for failing to protect, because it's been ruled over and over and over again, and you can look this up, and everybody listening can look this up. Google or Start Page or whatever you want to use, whatever search engine you use, type in no duty to protect, and you will find literally hundreds of Supreme Court cases where they have ruled the government has no duty to protect you. A really good real-world example of this is 9/11. 9/11, if you buy the official story, everybody in the military, everybody in the government, everybody in the NSA and the CIA and everybody at the place where they handle aircraft and all of that, all of them failed miserably to protect the American people. And yet none of them were held accountable for failing to protect. And that's because they do not have a duty to protect. And it's been ruled multiple times that the government does not have a duty to protect its citizens. So if citizens are members of the state and the state only exists if it offers protection, and it doesn't offer protection, that means that citizens do not legally exist and the state does not legally exist. So not only does the state not factually exist, but legally the state does not exist as well. And in order to have jurisdiction over somebody, in order for a judge to have jurisdiction over a case, or in order for a police officer to have jurisdiction to pull somebody over, a cop from Florida can't drive into California and pull somebody over because he doesn't have jurisdiction, is what they call it. In order to have jurisdiction to actually hear and try and apply the laws to you, they have to prove, one of the things that they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt is your presence within the state. If they cannot prove that you were present within the state at the time that you were caught committing the crime, if they can't prove that you were present within the state, then they don't have jurisdiction over you. Well, if the state doesn't exist factually and the state doesn't exist legally, then the state does not exist. And if the state does not exist, there is no way that they can prove you were inside of it, because it doesn't exist. You can't prove somebody was inside of something that doesn't exist. And if they can only prosecute you if they can prove that you were inside the state and the state doesn't exist, that means they have no way to actually prosecute anybody. And it's not that I think people should get away with being able to murder people or steal from people or anything like that. But the fact is, the way that they have the system set up, the fact that they want to be able to tax us and boss us around but not have the obligation to protect us, they've set themselves up in a situation where they created the catch-22. They created the very fact that they don't have the power to do what they want to do, because they want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to have the ability to tax, they want to have the ability to boss us around, but they don't want to fulfill their end of the contract or of the agreement, which is protection. So if they're not fulfilling their end of the agreement is null and void. The state doesn't exist, not factually, not legally. And if the state doesn't exist, there is no way to prove presence within the state. And a really easy, like I said earlier, I don't go in there and say, well, the state doesn't exist, so you can't have jurisdiction over me. The real easy way to do it is to ask the cop, officer, is it your testimony that on the date in question, I was within the state of Colorado, or whatever state that they're accusing you of being in? And he'll say yes. And then say, is that a factual opinion, or is that is that opinion based on facts, or is that an arbitrary opinion? And the cop will say, well, it's a fact that you were in the state of Colorado. And then follow that up real simply with, officer, factually speaking, what is a state? And they are not going to allow him to answer, because a state is a body politic that owes protection. And they don't owe protection, which means they don't have a state.
Do you think the judge would interrupt your line of questioning?
Every single time the judge says, you do not have to answer that question. And when he does that, I say, why not? And the prosecutor will almost always say, well, it calls for a legal determination. And then again, if he's not credible to make legal determinations, His legal determinations have to be stricken. But the fact is even if they don't say, well, he can't make legal determinations, even if they just say, well, he's just not allowed to testify to your presence within the state. Okay, well, what witnesses do you have that can testify to my presence within the state? Because you have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And if this officer can't testify to my presence within the state and no other witnesses are available, you have no way of proving my presence within the state. And that's one of their huge catch-22s. That's where the reality does not meet what they tell you. And once you lead them, starting with what they tell you, up to the reality, they hit a brick wall and they can't go forward.
Sitting back and even listening to what you're saying just blows my mind, and I already know it. But sitting back and actually hearing it coming out of someone else's mouth, and then as you're listening to it, you're putting an image in your mind's eye, and I can just picture the judge every time you're in there, Nathan. I can just picture the look on his or her face. It's got to be complete anger towards you because, I mean, how screwed up is it that these people walk around in society, right, with us? They go to the same stores and, food store or whatever, and yet they act like they're above us in a way that they literally know what's going on. They know that this is all crap because obviously their loopholes, right? You know the rules of the game. And here you are, you ask a simple question and you'd have the judge and the prosecutor all uppity about it, and they know what's up. So that it's not like, it would be one thing if they were like, huh? And you said, look, this is the law, blah, 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 and you had to school them and you showed them from law books or whatever. But it shows that they know what's going on when they snap right to it and say, no, don't answer that question, or, whatever, and they interrupt you. That goes to show that they are in the know, which technically, two or more people getting together to do something bad, i.e. a plot, what's that called again? Oh, a conspiracy. So technically this is a conspiracy to, at the very least, fleece you out of a certain amount of money so that they can still live their opulent lifestyle the way they want. And they literally, they know this. It's not like, you could say, oh, well, that poor judge, he didn't know. Or that prosecutor, he didn't know. The judge maybe knew, but the prosecutor, he couldn't have known. He's just a prosecutor. No. This goes to show their reaction to your one simple question goes to show their true colors.
Well, see, and that's why I consider myself to be an anarchist, is because once you start going through this and logically laying out what's going on, once you start coming to the terms that the state doesn't really exist, that it doesn't legally exist, that nobody has a legitimate right to tell you how to live your life. Nobody has a legitimate right to steal your money and spend it for you on things that they find necessary. Once you start realizing that, like you said, two people working together to defraud you or to fraud you, to take from you without legitimate cause is a conspiracy. Once you realize that all of what's going on in the criminal courts is actually a conspiracy, then you have to accept the fact that all government in general is a conspiracy. And once you realize that the very notion of government is a ruling class conspiring against the rest of the people, and that's all it has ever been, then you don't have to, but where I came from, by putting those pieces together, I realized all government is illegitimate. These people are not legitimate. These people are not necessary. These people are parasites. And for us to worship them, to build statues of them, to worship pieces of paper that they wrote, it really starts to seem silly. And I know that's blasphemous in the patriot movement to say that, but to think that someone could write stuff down on a piece of paper and then we deify them and we worship them and we allow them to issue orders to the rest of us, you really start to look at it and you're like, none of this makes sense. And why are we all still playing this? After thousands and thousands of years of evolution, why are we still playing this game?
Well, I've asked that on air before. Why haven't we evolved yet? Like, what's up? Why have we not just realized as a collective that they're irrelevant. And as soon as everybody realizes that they, the ruling class, are irrelevant and that everybody's on an equal plane, the doors that are opened and the possibilities that we have as, a human race working together become limitless. And they don't want that because they can't control that. Then their whole way of life changes. Thousands and thousands of years of, this grand plan, they can't have that because they feel that we're too stupid to rule ourselves. We couldn't possibly be smart enough to rule ourselves. I mean, I love when I've talked to people that, yuppies that kind of buy into this, and they'll say things like, well, look what the general public, they're so dumb. Well, first of all, judging the general public, I'll say, yes, that people are dumb, and I'll say things like, isn't it amazing the reaction? But I understand why. Because they've been vaccinated. They've been, chemically lobotomized through drugs, vaccines. They've been dumbed down with programming from the time they're little kids through the indoctrination system that they call the educational system. So I understand why people are dumb, but at the same time, it's so frustrating because it's like, are you kidding me? Like, that's the level of control these people have over everything. I mean, that's how you know, obviously. That's another flag right there, actually, in itself, Nathan, that there's something going on. And you think about it, to be able to keep humanity as a whole pushed back and kept down, from evolving, we should have evolved a long time ago. And the fact that we haven't in such a long period of time is in itself a huge red flag that there's something else going on.
There's an unnatural ingredient being added to what's going on.
Totally. An outside influence.
And one of the things that people often argue to me is like, because I'll say, and I honestly believe, government is not natural. It's not part of man's natural law. It's in man's nature to be free. It's in my nature to be free. I don't want to tell other people how to live their life. I don't want to spend other people's money. I don't want other people to tell me how to live my life, and I don't want them to try and tell me how to spend my money. The same, I'm sure, goes for you. The same goes for most people. But then people say, well, we've had government for so long. It's got to be something that's in our nature. Obviously, if government has been part of almost every society for the last 3,000 years, obviously it's something that's in our nature. And being free is just something that people don't actually want. And then the way that I respond to that is, if it was in our nature to have government, if it was in our nature to not want freedom, they wouldn't have to spend so much time and effort through media, through the public education system, through hiring police with guns to beat us every time we try and protest what's going on. If it was in our nature to just naturally be subservient to government and not want freedom, these people would not have to spend trillions and trillions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of hours and hundreds of thousands of police bullets and pepper spray. They wouldn't need all of that to force government down our throat. If it was in our nature to have government, if that was part of human nature, they wouldn't need all of the propaganda. They wouldn't need all of the violence. The violence and the propaganda go to prove that it is not in man's nature to be ruled by other men. The fact that slavery never can be accomplished through brute force because it always comes to an end. The fact that every single government always falls. The resistance always wins. It doesn't happen within one lifetime, but the resistance always wins. There is not one constant government throughout history. Every government falls. And that is proof that government is not in the natural law of man.
Well said, Nathan. Well said. Go ahead and plug your website, your YouTube channel, your radio show, and anything else you'd like to plug.
All right, it's all Live Free FM. So livefreefm.com, livefree.fm. The show is Live Free FM on the Orion Talk Radio Network every Saturday night at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. And the YouTube channel, and I hate the name now, but it's youtube.com/user/paranoid-patriot. But there's also youtube.com/user/livefreefm. So type in Live Free FM and go wherever that leads you. And that's the whole point of the show, is to live free.
Well, Nathan, thank you very much for coming on today, and thank you for doing the extra that we did here at the end. And thank you for all that you do, man. It's cool that you stand up and you help people, and then, you educate them from what you've learned through your experience to be able to do the same. Stepping up to the plate and sticking up for someone is one thing, but teaching somebody to be able to do it for themselves is a complete another. And that is one of the most powerful things that we can do as, I guess, truth tellers, whatever, knowledge seekers. I think one of the most powerful things that we can do is to give back to others in humanity and say, look, I'm not going to be selfish with this information. I don't need, I'm not like these people. And I think that that's the exact antithesis of this new world order system that they want to bring in. They control, only a certain amount of people have access to information, whereas we have to share this knowledge amongst ourselves. And I think that that's really a powerful thing, but it's also a noble thing. So thank you for what you do, Nathan. I know I appreciate it, and I know everyone out there that listens appreciates it. So I want to give you a big thank you for what you do.
Absolutely, and thank you for helping provide this platform to let your listeners kind of know the message that I'm trying to bring.
Anytime, man. The door is always open to you, Nathan. Always open. Thanks again for coming on.
All right, sweet, man. You have a good night.
You too, dude. Take it easy.
All right, peace.